Quinlan Zephyr had never been one to chase celestial headlines, but today was different. He had a one-way ticket to the most questionable real estate in the galaxy, a rogue planet orbiting the sun, Earth's weird cosmic neighbor. Picture a rock with an identity crisis, too hot to handle, yet everyone wanted a piece of it, like a drunken celebrity at a cheap nightclub. "Doctor." "Zephyr, your shuttle's ready," chirped a voice over the intercom, barely audible over the mechanized groans of Doc 73. The place smelled of burnt circuits and bad decisions, a perfect match for Quinlan's usual hangouts. He grabbed his rucksack, packed with more hope than actual preparation, and headed out. The shuttle, whimsically named the Last Resort, clearly what its engineers had in mind, awaited. It was the kind of ship that made you wonder if the bolts held the hull together or just kept it from crumbling in shame. Quinlan boarded with a sigh, greeted by the pungent aroma of stale sweat and recycled air. Inside, he was met by his co-pilot, a sly android named Mort. Mort had the charisma of a defrogged cybernetic butler and dressed like a used motherboard salesman. "Quinlan, you look like you've seen the inside of a black hole," Mort quipped. "And you look like you've been spat out by one," Quinlan retorted, dropping into his seat with the grace of a collapsing deck chair. "Let's get this tin can moving." Destination: the cosmic enigma that is Earth, current cult capital of the galaxy. "Shall we join the zealots or just watch them from a safe, cynical distance?" Mort asked, feigning excitement with the enthusiasm of a toaster. "Neither. We're going for a heist, Mort. Digging into the dirt to find out why every nutjob from Alpha Centauri to Zeta Reticuli is obsessed with our cradle of civilization." Mort initiated the launch sequence. "And here I thought we were just going for the sightseeing." Quinlan drummed his fingers on the console. "Yeah, well, if we uncover the secret to Earth's cult status, maybe we'll finally afford a shuttle that doesn't sound like it's about to fall apart." As the Last Resort peeled away from its docking constraints, Quinlan gazed at the receding spaceport. It was a haven for dreamers and fools, and Quinlan liked to think he qualified as a bit of both. "Engage the thrusters," he instructed, as if Mort needed convincing. "And if we don't make it, I blame you." The ship shuddered, rattling like an old man's knees in a snowstorm, and propelled them into the void. Space travel was a funny thing. You sit in a tin can hurtling through the vacuum, wondering if you'd be better off with an interstellar bus pass. The stars zipped by, indifferent as ever. "How's the rogue planet looking?" Quinlan asked, breaking the monotony. Mort pulled up the holographic display. "Looks about as welcoming as a hungry black hole, but it's there, orbiting your dear old sun like it was invited to the party. Earth's gone mad." "A cult pilgrimage site, can you believe it?" Quinlan mused aloud, adjusting his chair, which seemed hell-bent on impersonating a medieval torture device. "Believe it. I'm just here for the fireworks," Mort replied, dry as Martian sand. "What's your plan once we land? Find what everyone else is missing. Dust off some ancient artifacts and see what's so damn special about this rock." Mort cocked his head, servos whirring. "And if there's nothing, then at least we'll have the satisfaction of knowing we wasted our time and resources, just like every other fool in the galaxy." The journey continued with the kind of silence only the void could provide. A silence interrupted only by the occasional groaning of the ship, as if it was reconsidering its life choices. The rogue planet loomed large, a celestial oddball with all the charm of a spiked drink at a seedy bar. As they approached, the ship's sensors buzzed with activity, not exactly the reassuring kind. "Looks like we've got company," Mort announced, pointing at the array of blinking lights on the console. "Great, just what I needed. More lunatics," Quinlan muttered, watching as the holographic display lit up with other ships orbiting the supposed Holy Land. "Cultists, pilgrims, treasure hunters. Looks like a family reunion," Mort said, his voice a monotone symphony of sarcasm. "Let's see how close we can get without attracting too much attention." "Stealth mode, if you please," Quinlan said, though stealth was more a hypothetical concept than a reality in their rattletrap of a ship. The Last Resort hummed, dimming its lights and pretending, rather poorly, to be invisible. Landing site secured, Mort announced, bringing the ship down with all the elegance of a controlled crash. Quinlan strapped on his gear, his heart pounding in a rhythm that screamed both excitement and dread. Time to see what all the fuss is about. Do try not to get converted, Mort called after him, as Quinlan stepped out into the dusty atmosphere of the rogue planet. The air was thick, oppressive, and laced with the smell of old decay. Quinlan squinted at the horizon, where a cluster of makeshift tents and oddball structures sprawled, a testament to humanity's resilience and penchant for questionable decisions. "Looks like home," he said to no one in particular. He trudged toward the encampment, a patchwork of ambition and desperation. As he neared, the bizarre inhabitants of this cosmic commune came into view. They were a motley crew, each more peculiar than the last, like someone had thrown together a convention of conspiracy theorists and forgotten the exit signs. "Welcome, seeker of truth," bellowed a man clad in robes that even a blind nun would question, his eyes wide with fervor. "Yeah, truth, that's what I'm here for," Quinlan replied, his voice thick with sarcasm. Not to get fleeced by a bunch of intergalactic charlatans. The robed man didn't seem to catch the sarcasm, or maybe he just didn't care. The truth of Earth's ascension will be revealed to those who dedicate themselves to the cause. And what's the cause exactly? Spiritual enlightenment or just lining your own pockets? Quinlan asked, scanning the crowd for anyone who didn't look like they'd drunk the Kool-Aid. "Earth is the beacon of cosmic unity," the man intoned, gesturing grandly to the heavens. Quinlan raised an eyebrow. "A beacon, huh?" He'd seen beacons before, and they usually involved lighthouses, not dilapidated tents on a rogue planet. "Think I'll pass on the group chant and just do a bit of exploring on my own." He moved away, leaving the man to extol Earth's cosmic virtues to the next gullible soul. Quinlan wound through the encampment, picking up snippets of conversation that ranged from the absurd to the downright terrifying. "I hear the artifacts are hidden beneath the old ruins," a voice whispered conspiratorially. Quinlan's ears perked up. "Heard that one before," he muttered to himself, but it was a lead, and leads in this place were as rare as common sense. As he made his way toward the supposed ruins, the landscape shifted under his feet, unsteady, unstable, much like the belief systems of those who camped here. The ruins were a crumbling testament to humanity's arrogance, remnants of some forgotten civilization, or perhaps just another failed experiment. Quinlan slipped inside the largest structure, its interior shadowed and foreboding. It was the kind of place that screamed bad idea and then laughed when you ignored the warning. He fiddled with his scanner, the device blinking in and out like it was on the verge of retirement. "Come on, give me something," he coaxed, poking at its innards. The scanner flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the ancient stonework. Symbols danced across the walls, a language long lost or perhaps never found. "Interesting," Quinlan murmured, tracing a finger over the designs. "Or maybe just plain crazy." The scanner beeped insistently, a signal from below. Quinlan's heart skipped a beat. Adventure or imminent death, it was always a toss-up. "Mort, you getting this?" he called over his comm. "If by this you mean your imminent demise, then yes," Mort replied, ever the optimist. Quinlan chuckled, though the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the ruins. He moved deeper, every step echoing with the ghosts of history, or maybe just his own paranoia. And then, there it was. A chamber buried beneath layers of time and neglect. At its center stood an artifact, gleaming with a light that seemed out of place in this dusty tomb. "Well, aren't you a pretty sight?" Quinlan said, approaching with cautious reverence. The artifact pulsed, a rhythmic glow that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. Quinlan reached out, fingers brushing against its surface. A jolt shot through him, a connection forged across centuries. "Quinlan, what's happening?" Mort's voice crackled through the comm, tinged with something that might have been concern or maybe just curiosity. "I think I found it," Quinlan breathed, eyes wide with the possibilities. "The reason everyone's gone nuts, The chamber rumbled, and Quinlan realized too late that he might have triggered something best left forgotten. "Well, shit," he muttered as the walls began to close in, ancient mechanisms grinding to life. "Quinlan." Mort's voice was a distant echo as everything faded to black. And with that, the secrets of Earth's cult status remained a mystery, for now. Quinlan Zephyr awoke to the smell of burnt ozone and the sound of something struggling to breathe. It took a moment to realize the wheezing was his own chest heaving against a collapsed lung. With a groan that could have come from any of his sore body parts, he picked himself up from the rubble. "Welcome back to the land of the living, or at least the limping," Mort's voice crackled through Quinlan's calm, sounding like a defrosting android with a hangover. "Thanks, Mort. Your heartfelt concern is the reason I cling to life," Quinlan replied, dusting off what felt like a kilo of ancient dirt from his jacket. His surroundings were still a blur of jagged stones and ominous shadows, the kind of place where Indiana Jones would have thought twice before entering. "You've got company," Mort chimed in, as Quinlan's vision focused on two familiar figures edging toward him through the dust and debris. Blip Tundra, their engineer, and Lexa Quix, the linguist with a tongue sharp enough to cut through steel. "Ah, my favorite dysfunctional family," Quinlan greeted, trying to inject some enthusiasm into his voice and failing spectacularly. "Quinlan, you look like crap," Blip said, his eyes scanning Quinlan's bruised frame with the efficiency of a mechanic estimating repair costs. "Glad to see you too, Blip. Next time, maybe warn me before I dive headfirst into a collapsing tomb." Blip shrugged, his face a canvas of indifference. "I tried, but you were all, 'I'm a lone explorer, I'll be fine.' So how'd that work out for you?" Lexa gave Quinlan a once-over, her expression hovering somewhere between amusement and exasperation. "Found anything interesting, or just the usual death traps?" Quinlan gestured toward the stone altar that he'd nearly become a permanent part of. "Depends on your definition of interesting." "Found an artifact that lights up like a Christmas tree, though I'm not quite sure if it's God or just a fancy nightlight." Blip's eyes lit up in a way that usually meant he was about to take something apart to see how it worked. "Where is it?" "Buried under a few tons of rock, thanks to my accidental redecorating," Quinlan replied, trying to mask the disappointment with a casual shrug. Lexa rolled her eyes. "Great. A mission where our biggest success is not getting buried alive. Yet. Speaking of which, we might have more than just falling rubble to worry about," Quinlan added, nodding toward the entrance, where a group of alien figures loomed like unwelcome party crashers. The new arrivals were tall and draped in flowing robes that managed to look both ancient and freshly laundered. Their faces were hidden behind masks that resembled the love child of a gas mask and a tribal headdress. "The Zogwins," Lexa whispered, her voice tinged with equal parts awe and annoyance. "Fanatics who think Earth is the universal glue that'll fix the cosmos." "Do they have a newsletter?" Quinlan asked, rubbing his temples. "Because they're probably the only cult I haven't joined yet." The Zogwins approached, their leader stepping forward with the cautious grace of someone who was either about to preach or pounce. "Welcome, seekers. You stand upon sacred ground," the leader intoned, their voice carrying the kind of gravitas usually reserved for last will and testaments. "Yeah, about that," Quinlan said, raising a hand like he was in a classroom. "Could we maybe ask you a few questions about your beliefs before we all join hands and sing Kumbaya?" The leader's expression was unreadable behind the mask, but Quinlan could feel the weight of judgment in the silence that followed. "We are the Zogwins. Earth's mysteries are ours to unravel." Lexa leaned in, whispering to Quinlan, "You know they believe Earth holds the secret to universal harmony, right?" "Like a cosmic band-aid." "Great," Quinlan muttered. "We've stumbled into the galaxy's biggest group therapy session." Blip, meanwhile, had wandered over to where the rubble was thickest, poking at the stones with a curious mechanical intensity. "This artifact of yours, does it emit any energy readings? Is that your way of asking if it can be weaponized?" Quinlan shot back. "Because if so, it's a solid maybe." The Zogwin leader watched them with a patience that only enhanced the creep factor. "You have touched the sacred artifact, have you not?" Quinlan shrugged. "Touched, poked, maybe triggered an ancient security system. It's a blur." The leader nodded sagely, as if Quinlan had just confessed to stealing a cookie from the galactic jar. "The artifact's light is a beacon for those who seek truth." "Truth? Or just a light show to lure in the gullible?" Lexa challenged, crossing her arms with a defiance that was contagious. "The truth is often clothed in the unlikeliest of guises," the leader replied, cryptic enough to make any fortune cookie proud. "Can we skip the riddles and get to the part where you tell us what you actually want?" Quinlan suggested, leaning against a semi-stable wall. The Zogwins shared a collective glance, like a synchronized swimming team contemplating a new routine. "We seek the vault," the leader finally admitted, each word carrying the weight of prophecy. "And let me guess, it's hidden beneath these ruins," Quinlan sighed, already anticipating the answer. The leader nodded. "Yes, but only those pure of heart can unveil its secrets." "Pure of heart," Blip snorted, finally tearing his attention away from the rubble. "In that case, we're all screwed." "Yeah, I don't think any of us are winning the Nobel Peace Prize anytime soon," Quinlan added, rubbing his chin. "We must unite," the leader said, their tone almost pleading now. "Together we can save it," Lexa cut in, her voice sharper than a razor-backed asteroid. "We're not here to join your cosmic book club." "She's got a point," Quinlan said, pushing off the wall. "We're here to find out why everyone's so hell-bent on turning Earth into the next galactic hotspot." The Zogwin leader's masked face seemed to tilt just slightly, conveying confusion or perhaps pity. "You will see. Earth is the key." "Key to what?" Blip asked, the skepticism in his voice thick enough to cut with a knife. "To everything," the leader said, the words hanging in the air like the world's worst punchline. Quinlan exchanged a glance with his team, taking in the mix of annoyance, curiosity, and outright disbelief. "Well, if it's everything, we might as well take a look, right?" "Right," Lexa sighed, as if agreeing to an inevitable train wreck. "I'll see what I can dig up," Blip said, gesturing to the mess of rubble. Literal and figurative. The Zogwin stepped back, granting the team space with the reverence of stagehands clearing a set. "We will wait. The truth will reveal itself." Quinlan turned back to his team, shaking his head. "I swear, if I hear one more word about truth, I'm gonna lose it." "Just remember," Mort's voice buzzed in, "if you die, I'll be left explaining things to the insurance company." "And I hate paperwork." "Noted, Mort," Quinlan replied, as they set to work. "Let's get to the bottom of this before the bottom gets to us." Iors blurred into a haze of dust and exertion as they sifted through the ruins. The Zogwins watched with a silent patience that was almost more unsettling than their fervor. And just when Quinlan thought his arms might fall off from the effort, Blip let out a triumphant shout. "Found it!" The artifact lay half-buried, its glow pulsing in time with Quinlan's heartbeat. It was an unimposing thing, not much bigger than a football, but it hummed with a power that was hard to ignore. "Well, damn," Lexa said, her skepticism wavering as she approached. "Maybe there is something to this." The artifact's surface shimmered, casting intricate patterns of light that danced over their faces. Quinlan reached out, his fingers brushing the surface, and felt a jolt spike through him like a shot of espresso to the soul. "What do we do with it?" Blip asked, eyeing the object like it was about to sprout legs and run off. Quinlan turned back to the Zogwin leader, who now seemed more like a statue than a person, frozen in anticipation. "We found your little trinket." "Now what?" "The vault will open to those who carry the artifact," the leader said, their voice a whisper that somehow carried across the room. "And what's in this vault?" Lexa asked, her voice edged with suspicion. "The truth of Earth," the leader replied, as if that answered everything. Quinlan rolled his eyes. "Of course, the truth." "Should have guessed." "Whatever it is," Blip added, "we should probably get to it before this place decides to fall apart again." "Yeah, I'm not in the mood for another nap under a pile of rocks," Quinlan agreed, hefting the artifact with a grunt. The path before them was as clear as a promise and about as trustworthy. With the artifact in hand, Quinlan led them onward into the depths of the ruins, where the secrets of the rogue planet and perhaps the universe awaited. And if those secrets turned out to be just more questions wrapped in riddles, well, at least they could say they tried. Quinlan trudged forward, each step a negotiation with the shifting stones beneath his boots. The vault, assuming it was more than just another figment of the Zogwins' collective imagination, supposedly lay deeper within the ruins. Behind him, Blip muttered calculations under his breath, likely hypothesizing how many ways the expedition could go wrong, while Lexa exhaled loudly enough to make her disdain audible. "So this relic we're looking for," Lexa began, her tone as sharp as a laser scalpel. "Is it supposed to flip the galaxy on its head or just make everyone really uncomfortable?" "Maybe it's just a cosmic whoopee cushion," Quinlan suggested. "Though if it can influence galactic politics, we're probably looking at something a bit more sophisticated. Or catastrophic," Blip added, delighting in his own brand of optimism. Never underestimate the universe's ability to turn a bad situation worse. The path narrowed as they descended, the air growing thick with humidity, like they'd walked into an armpit. Quinlan wiped his brow, trying to focus on anything but the beads of sweat clinging to his neck. Why can't ancient vaults ever be conveniently located? Like right by a beach or a nice cafe, Quinlan grumbled, pushing aside a particularly aggressive vine. "Because then they wouldn't be ancient or hidden, would they?" Lexa countered, sidestepping a puddle that looked suspiciously sentient. "Plus, I'm pretty sure the original architects didn't plan on a bunch of treasure hunters poking around. A flaw in their design philosophy," Blip noted, prying a stubborn rock from the path with the gusto of a disgruntled landlord evicting an unwanted tenant. The walls around them were etched with symbols, likely the Zogwins' bedtime reading or an ancient grocery list. Quinlan ran a hand over them, trying to decipher their meaning as if he was suddenly fluent in gibberish. "So, Lexa, your professional expertise coming in handy?" Quinlan asked, throwing her a sidelong glance. Lexa squinted at the walls, her expression torn between intellectual curiosity and the need for glasses. "It's either an ancient prophecy or a recipe for really bad soup." "Hard to say." "Well, let's hope it's the kind of prophecy that ends with us walking away rich and not dead," Quinlan replied, the heat of the corridor playing tricks with his resolve. The air grew cooler the deeper they went, a welcome change from the oppressive humidity. But with the chill came an unsettling feeling, like they'd wandered into a monster's den and were just waiting for it to snap shut. It wasn't long before the path opened into a cavernous chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, disappearing into shadows, while the ground was littered with debris and predictably more ominous-looking stones. "Lovely place. Real fixer-upper," Blip said, looking around with the appraising eye of a real estate agent specializing in death traps. "Yeah, just needs a little TLC and maybe an exorcism," Quinlan agreed, squinting into the gloom. At the chamber's center, a pedestal stood, almost coy in its simplicity. Above it hovered a faintly glowing shape, the supposed relic that promised either salvation or doom, depending on your perspective or level of optimism, which Quinlan had long since misplaced. "That it?" Lexa asked, suspicion coloring her tone as she eyed the object. Blip nodded, a rare flicker of awe breaking through his usual stoicism. "Looks like it. The energy readings are off the charts." "Off the charts, good or bad?" Quinlan questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Good for us, bad for anyone who doesn't like surprises," Blip replied, stepping cautiously toward the pedestal. As they approached, a low hum filled the air, resonating through their bones like a bass note at a particularly obnoxious concert. It was as soothing as it was unsettling, and Quinlan felt a strange pull toward the relic, like it was calling to him, promising secrets and consequences in equal measure. "Anyone else hear that?" Quinlan asked, taking a tentative step closer. "Yeah," Lexa confirmed, her voice tinged with discomfort. "And it's not exactly making me want to stick around for the encore." "We've come this far," Blip reminded them, reaching out to touch the relic. His fingers hovered just above its surface, mind racing with calculations and potential outcomes. And then, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment, the relic flared to life, casting the room in blinding light. Quinlan shielded his eyes, cursing the universe's penchant for dramatic flair. When the light subsided, he blinked away the spots dancing in his vision, only to find the chamber transformed. Where there had been solid stone and shadows, there now stood figures, semi-transparent and ghostly. They wore expressions of solemnity or constipation, Quinlan couldn't quite tell, and their eyes seemed to bore into him with the weight of 1,000 ignored warnings. "Who are they?" Lexa asked, her voice a whisper, though the specters seemed about as threatening as a stern librarian. "Spectators," Quinlan guessed, unwilling to voice the idea that they might be the remnants of ancient guardians or, worse, welcome party for the newly damned. Blip studied the apparitions with a detached curiosity, as if analyzing a particularly stubborn algorithm. "Whatever they are, they don't seem to be moving." "Good," Quinlan said with a nod. "I'm not in the mood for a ghostly intervention." The relic's glow pulsed, and Quinlan felt a jolt in his mind, a flash of images and impressions. A great council, worlds in flames, an echo of laughter, none of it coherent, like a dream barely remembered upon waking. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog. "Anyone else see that?" Quinlan asked, looking to his companions for confirmation and sanity. Blip nodded, looking uncharacteristically rattled. "Something about a council and destruction." "Yeah, like a bad acid trip," Lexa confirmed, rubbing her temples. "This thing's projecting some heavy stuff." "Big surprise," Quinlan muttered. "We find something potentially universe-altering, and it comes with a side of cryptic visions." The relic's energy thrummed through the air again, the hum now a companionable drone. Quinlan stepped back, trying to distance himself from the oppressive weight of destiny, or maybe just a really bad migraine. "So what now?" Lexa asked, her tone edged with the same exasperation Quinlan felt gnawing at his bones. "We figure out what to do with it," Quinlan replied, casting a wary glance at the Zogwans who stood at the chamber's edge, their reverent silence unchanged. "And try not to blow up a solar system in the process." "Sounds like a plan," Blip agreed, though his focus remained on the relic. "But we should move quickly. We're not the only ones interested in this place." As if summoned by Blip's words, a new sound filled the chamber, the unmistakable clatter of boots on stone. Quinlan spun around, heart sinking faster than a lead balloon. The rival faction, opportunistic and as unwelcome as a fart in an elevator, made their entrance. They were a ragtag bunch, their armor mismatched and faces obscured by helmets that looked like they'd seen better days and worse intentions. Their leader, a hulking figure with a swagger that screamed overcompensation, stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Well, well," he drawled, his tone dripping with smugness and the kind of self-assurance usually reserved for used ship salesmen. "Looks like we're not the only ones interested in a little treasure hunting," Quinlan sighed, already weary of the confrontation. "Great. Company. Just what this party needed." The leader's eyes flicked to the relic, the greed in his expression as blatant as a billboard. "We'll be taking that if you don't mind." "And if we do mind?" Lexa asked, her stance defiant even as she sized up their odds, which, Quinlan noted, weren't exactly in their favor. The leader chuckled, a sound that grated on Quinlan's nerves like sandpaper on metal. "Then you can kindly step aside or be persuaded otherwise." "Persuasion, huh?" Quinlan mused, cracking his knuckles with more bravado than actual confidence. "I'm guessing that involves something pointy." "Only if you're uncooperative," the leader replied, his grin as charming as a rabid ferret. "Well, far be it from us to ruin your day," Quinlan said, sidling closer to the relic and hoping the Zogwan's devotion included some protective instincts. Before anyone could make the first move, the relic pulsed, a wave of energy radiating outward like a ripple in a pond. Quinlan barely had time to duck as the chamber erupted into chaos, the specters swirling into a frenzy. The rival faction stumbled back, weapons dropping as they shielded themselves from the Phantom's wrath. Quinlan seized the opportunity, grabbing the relic with a grip fueled by equal parts desperation and adrenaline. "Time to go," he shouted to his team, motioning toward the exit as the chamber descended into pandemonium. Blip and Lexa didn't need telling twice, following Quinlan's lead as they darted for safety, the Zogwins trailing behind with surprising agility. The chamber echoed with the clamor of retreating footsteps and the eerie wails of the specters, but Quinlan pushed forward, focused on the narrow corridor ahead and the promise of escape. Once they were clear of the chamber and its spectral inhabitants, Quinlan allowed himself a moment to breathe, leaning against a wall that felt reassuringly solid. "Well, that was fun," he panted, glancing at the relic now firmly in his grasp. "Remind me to never do that again." "Noted," Lexa replied, her expression a mix of relief and lingering tension. "So, what's the plan now?" "We've got ourselves a powerful piece of ancient tech and a bunch of angry treasure hunters on our tail. First, we get out of here in one piece," Quinlan said, pushing off the wall with renewed determination. "Then we figure out how to use this thing without accidentally declaring war on the galaxy." "Sounds like a plan," Blip agreed, though his gaze remained fixed on the relic, eyes alight with the thrill of discovery and danger. "Yeah, just another day at the office," Quinlan quipped, leading the way through the ruins with the relic tucked securely under his arm, determined to see the mission through to its uncertain end. As they made their way back through the labyrinthine corridors, Quinlan couldn't shake the feeling that they'd crossed a line, a threshold between mundane scavenging and the kind of destiny that usually ended with a spectacular implosion. But for now, he'd settle for getting them all out alive, with the promise of a cold drink and a long, long nap waiting somewhere beyond the stars. Quinlan Zephyr was fairly certain that if the universe had a sense of humor, it was the kind that involved whoopee cushions and banana peels. Because as the team dashed through the ruins, barely keeping ahead of the ghostly chaos they'd left behind, his calm crackled to life with Mort's unmistakably sardonic voice. "Hey, Quinlan. You lot still kicking, or should I start writing your obituaries?" Mort asked, static drowning out some of the cheerfulness in his morbid inquiry. Quinlan adjusted the calm, panting as the relic bounced under his arm like a hyperactive child. "Still here, Mort, though I might be dead on my feet." "Well, try to keep it that way. Dead on feet's better than just plain dead. You got company, by the way." "And not the nice sort," Quinlan groaned, glancing back at Blip and Lexa, who were managing to keep pace despite the lunacy of their situation. "Yeah, we noticed. The Slarvians, right?" "Right you are. Heard they've got a religious hard-on for Earth. Think it's divine or some such nonsense." "Great. Zealots," Quinlan muttered. "Just what the galaxy needs, more self-righteous fanatics with guns." The team skidded around a corner, the sound of their own footfalls drowned out by distant shouts growing ever closer. Quinlan's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan before the Slarvians caught up and made things even more unpleasant. "All right, team," Quinlan called over his shoulder, "we're gonna have to be clever here." "Suggestions? Do we have time for a seance?" Lexa quipped, her wit sharp even as they raced for their lives. "Not unless you've got a Ouija board hidden somewhere," Quinlan replied. Blip's eyes darted around, calculating odds like a bookie at a horse race. "We could collapse part of the corridor behind us." Quinlan raised an eyebrow. "And how do you suggest we do that without getting buried ourselves?" Blip shrugged, his answer to the universe's many unsolvable problems. "Judicious application of explosives, of course." "Subtlety as always," Quinlan said, shaking his head. "Fine, but make it quick. The only thing I want to be buried with is a stiff drink." Blip set to work, fumbling with his pack as they ran. The man might not say much, but he could rig a charge faster than you could say bad decision. Meanwhile, the echoes of their pursuers grew louder, with the Slarvian leader, Crix, barking orders as if he were conducting a symphony of idiocy. Quinlan took a deep breath, trying to ignore the sweat trickling down his back. "Hey, Crix," he shouted, his voice bouncing off the ancient walls. "Why don't you turn back? I hear Earth's got better hospitality than this place." The response was a bark of laughter, as dry and humorless as sandpaper. "Nice try, Zephyr, but we're not leaving without that relic." "Figures," Quinlan muttered to himself. "Why is it that every villain sounds like they signed up for a motivational seminar but skipped the empathy class?" Blip finished setting the charges, glancing up with a grim nod. "Done. But we need to move." Quinlan didn't need telling twice. "Right. Everybody ready. Let's make sure these bastards remember us." The team sprinted forward, the tension in the air as thick as the dust they kicked up. Behind them, the corridor rang with the sound of Blip's handiwork, a sharp, resonant boom that sent a cascade of stone and debris crashing down in their wake. Quinlan dared a glance back, grinning at the sight of the blocked passage. "That's one way to make an exit. Temporary," Blip warned, his eyes still scanning for potential pitfalls. "They'll dig through eventually." "Then we'd better not be here when they do," Lexa added, her voice breathless but steady. Their path twisted and turned through the ruins, each corner and corridor blending into the next in a maddening labyrinth. Quinlan's mind was a whirl, not just with the immediate danger but with the weight of responsibility that came with the relic. Whatever it was, it had chosen to reveal itself to him, and just maybe it had chosen him for something more. But first things first, survival, preferably without losing any limbs or team members in the process. As they emerged into a cavernous chamber, Quinlan slowed, his instincts screaming at him to pause and assess. The open space was a stark contrast to the claustrophobic corridors, its high ceiling lost in shadow and its walls marked with the faded remnants of a forgotten civilization. "Anyone else get the feeling we're not alone?" Lexa asked, her voice carrying an edge of tension. "Always," Quinlan replied, scanning their surroundings with wary eyes. "But right now I'm more worried about who's trying to change that." "Quinlan," Mort's voice crackled in his ear again, "you're getting close to a way out. Should be a service hatch just ahead." "Thanks, Mort. I knew you were good for something other than sarcasm." "Hey, sarcasm's a legitimate survival skill," Mort shot back. "Don't knock it." With Mort's guidance, they pushed on, skirting around piles of rubble and broken machinery. Each step felt like a countdown, the seconds ticking away as they raced against the Slarvians' determination and their own dwindling stamina. Finally, they spotted the hatch, an unassuming portal set into the wall, its surface marred by age and neglect. Quinlan's heart lifted, relief mingling with caution as they approached their potential salvation. "This it?" Blip asked, eyeing the hatch with suspicion. "Only one way to find out," Quinlan replied. He pushed at the hatch, grunting with effort as it resisted his attempts to open it. "Lexa, give me a hand here." Together, Quinlan and Lexa wrestled with the hatch, their combined strength no match for rusted hinges and stubborn metal. But as they strained, Blip stepped forward with a look of mild exasperation. "Move over," he said, producing a small device from his pack. With a deft flick of his wrist, the device emitted a focused pulse that reverberated through the air, and the hatch clicked open with an almost reluctant sigh. "Show off," Lexa muttered, though her relief was palpable. "Let's go," Quinlan urged, ushering the team through the opening. As they clambered into the narrow passage beyond, he couldn't shake the feeling of being funneled into the unknown, like a pea shot through a straw. The passage sloped upward, its walls close enough to brush against his shoulders. Each step felt heavier, as if the relic's weight was growing in his grasp. And as they climbed, Quinlan couldn't help but wonder if they were finally leaving behind the worst, or simply trading one brand of chaos for another. When they emerged at last into the open air, the landscape that greeted them was a wasteland of barren rock and starry skies. The ruins lay sprawled below them, a dark testament to forgotten dreams and misplaced ambition. "Well, at least it's not raining," Lexa commented, her voice light despite the weariness etched into her features. Quinlan chuckled, though the sound was tinged with fatigue. "Small mercies, right?" As they took a moment to catch their breath, Blip busied himself with their equipment, checking for damage and confirming their bearings. The man was a machine in human skin, his efficiency both impressive and infuriating. "Now what?" Lexa asked, her gaze fixed on Quinlan with an intensity that suggested she'd prefer a more concrete plan than run and hope for the best. Quinlan considered their options, which were about as plentiful as a vegan buffet in a meat-loving galaxy. "We need to get back to the last resort. Mort, you still with us?" "Always," Mort replied, his tone as dry as a desert. "And just so you know, you've got a welcoming committee en route. Slarvians, no doubt. They're persistent, I'll give him that." "Damn," Quinlan muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I was hoping they'd take the hint." "Apparently not," Mort said. "You'd better haul ass. The shuttle's ready, but it won't hold up to a firefight." "Right," Quinlan said, turning to his team with a grim smile. "Looks like we've got a race on our hands." "Ready to show those Slarvians what they are dealing with?" Blip gave a rare grin, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. "Let's do this." Lexa nodded, her expression steeled with determination. "I'm in, but let's try not to make a habit of this." With that, they set off across the desolate landscape, the distant lights of their shuttle a beacon of hope amid the encroaching darkness. The terrain was treacherous, each step a gamble against twisted ankle or broken limb. But driven by urgency and adrenaline, they pressed on, the night air biting at their skin. The sound of engines reached them first, a low, ominous rumble that grew louder with each passing second. Quinlan didn't need to look back to know that the Slarvians were closing in, their relentless pursuit fueled by zealotry and an unhealthy obsession with ancient relics. "Faster," Quinlan urged, his voice barely audible over the wind and their pounding footsteps. The shuttle loomed ahead, its ungainly silhouette a welcome sight despite its dubious reliability. As they neared, Mort's voice crackled in his ear again, a lifeline of humor and pragmatism. "Nice of you to drop by," Mort said. "I've got her ready to fly, but you might want to hurry. Those Slarvians aren't taking no for an answer." Quinlan gritted his teeth, pushing himself harder as they reached the shuttle's open ramp. "Noted. Just keep her steady." They piled into the last resort, the shuttle's interior a hodgepodge of wires, consoles, and questionable engineering choices. Quinlan slammed his hand on the control panel, the hatch ceiling shut with a groan of protest, as if even the ship itself was reluctant to be part of this escapade. "Get us out of here, Mort," Quinlan called, collapsing into a seat as the shuttle shuddered to life. "On it," Mort replied, his voice cool and composed. The engines roared and the shuttle lurched upward, leaving the barren rock and the approaching Slarvians behind in a blur of motion. As they climbed through the atmosphere, the tension in the cabin slowly eased, replaced by the familiar hum of the ship's systems and the reassuring weight of survival. Quinlan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his mind already racing ahead to the uncertainties that awaited them. "So," Lexa said, breaking the silence with her usual candor, "what's next on our list of terrible ideas?" Quinlan chuckled, though the sound was tinged with exhaustion. "First, we catch our breath. Then we figure out what this relic wants with us, and how to stop it from blowing up half the galaxy." Blip nodded, his expression thoughtful as he examined the relic with renewed interest. "Sounds like a plan." "Yeah," Quinlan agreed, though his mind was already returning to the visions that had plagued him earlier. Just another day at the office. As the last resort sped away from the ruins and into the starlit void, Quinlan couldn't shake the feeling that their journey had only just begun, and that the true test lay somewhere beyond the stars, waiting with open arms and a wicked grin. The last resort had a personality, mostly that of a crabby old man who smoked too much and grumbled about the weather, but it was a comforting kind of cranky. Quinlan felt a kinship with the ship's groans and grumbles as they skimmed the edge of a cosmic storm that looked about as welcoming as a punch in the gut. "Let me guess, Mort," Quinlan said, casting a glance at the threatening swirls of cosmic chaos outside. "You've got a weather update for us." Mort's voice crackled through the comms with the enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Oh, just the usual doom and gloom. Massive storm front rolling in, chance of thunderbolts and lightning, Very, very frightening. Galileo, Lexa chimed in deadpan. Thanks for the update, Freddy. Anytime, darling, Mort retorted. But seriously, you might want to think about doing something about it. Preferably quick. Blip was hunched over a navigation console that looked like it had been designed by a mad scientist with a vendetta against logic. His fingers danced over the controls with a confidence Quinlan hadn't seen before, like he was born to navigate through hellish space weather. Got any bright ideas, Blip? Quinlan asked, knowing full well he'd be lucky to get more than a grunt in response. Blip didn't even look up. Yep, but you're not going to like it. Fantastic, Lexa muttered, leaning back in her seat with a resigned sigh. I love plans that start with "you're not going to like it." Blip tapped a few more buttons, the ship shuddering in response. We need to dive into the storm. Quinlan blinked. Come again? You heard me, Blip said, the barest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Into the storm, Lexa repeated as if trying to make sense of the words. Why? Because we haven't risked our lives enough today. Because, Blip explained with the patience of a saint, and the tone of someone explaining basic math to a particularly obstinate child, the Slarvians won't follow us in. They're fanatics, not idiots. Guess there's a first time for everything, Quinlan sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. All right, fine. Let's do it. But if we die, I'm haunting you. You'll have to take a number, Blip said, adjusting their trajectory with a deft twist of his wrist. The last resort plunged into the storm, the ship rattling like a tin can in a hurricane. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the cockpit in brief, blinding bursts. The ship protested loudly, every rattle and groan a testament to its dubious integrity. Quinlan strapped himself in tighter, the harness biting into his shoulders. Remind me again why we do this. Because we're idiots, Lexa offered helpfully, her knuckles white on the arms of her seat. And because we're damn good at it, Quinlan added with a grin, though it was more bravado than truth. Speak for yourselves, Mort interjected. I'm just here for the witty banter, which you provide in spades, Quinlan replied, holding onto the console as the ship took another bone-jarring lurch. How are we doing, Blip? Blip was a picture of calm in the chaos, his eyes fixed on the readouts. We're threading the needle, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. Great, Lexa said, rolling her eyes. Just when I thought my day couldn't get any better. The storm howled around them, a cacophony of wind and fury that felt as if the universe itself had taken umbrage at their existence. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring in a discordant symphony of doom. Mort, Quinlan called over the din, his voice taut with tension. We're still in one piece, Mort replied, sounding far too nonchalant for Quinlan's liking. Though I wouldn't book any cruises in the near future, noted, Quinlan said, glancing at Lexa. You holding up? Lexa nodded, though her face was pale. I've had worse dates, Quinlan snorted, the sound lost in the storm's roar. Remind me to get you a better class of suitor. As they pressed on, the ship bucking like a bronco, Quinlan couldn't help but marvel at Blip's unerring instinct. The man was a wizard, guiding them through the maelstrom with a mix of skill and sheer stubbornness. Who taught you to fly like this? Quinlan asked, genuinely curious. Blip shrugged, his focus never wavering. Picked it up here and there, right, Lexa said, with a hint of skepticism. And I'm the Queen of Sheba, Blip cracked a rare smile. Your Majesty. The storm began to abate, the ship's violent shudders easing into a more manageable tremor. The silence that followed was almost deafening, a blessed relief after the chaos. We're through, Blip announced simply, as if he hadn't just pulled off a minor miracle. Quinlan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Remind me to never doubt you again. I'll add it to the list, Blip said, finally looking away from the controls. Great, Lexa said, unclipping her harness with a relieved sigh. Now that we've survived that, can we talk about where the hell we're going? Back to the mission, Quinlan replied, though his words lacked conviction. Lexa crossed her arms, fixing him with a penetrating gaze. And what exactly is the mission again? Besides getting ourselves killed in increasingly creative ways, Quinlan paused, the weight of her question settling like a stone in his gut. The relic. We need to find out what it is and why everyone's after it. And if it turns out to be another cosmic MacGuffin? Lexa pressed, her skepticism palpable. Then we make sure it doesn't blow up the galaxy, Quinlan said, though even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Blip leaned back, his expression unreadable. We could use it as leverage. Maybe even get a little breathing room. That's assuming we live long enough, Lexa pointed out. And that the Slarvians don't find us first. Quinlan nodded, the enormity of their task looming large in his mind. We'll figure it out. We always do. Yeah, Lexa said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. But maybe next time we could figure it out without nearly dying. One can hope, Quinlan replied with a wry smile. As they settled into a weary silence, the ship's systems hummed around them, a reminder of their fragile existence in the vastness of space. Quinlan stared out at the stars, each one a tiny beacon of light in the darkness, and wondered what the universe would throw at them next. Mort, Quinlan said, breaking the quiet, can you plot us a course to somewhere we can lay low? We need to regroup, figure out our next move. Already on it, Mort replied. There's a little outpost a few systems over. Not much, but it'll do in a pinch. Sounds perfect, Quinlan said. Lexa shifted in her seat, her expression thoughtful. You ever wonder why we do this? Why we keep pushing our luck? Quinlan considered the question, the answer both simple and complicated. Because we have to. Because if we don't, someone else will, and they might not give a damn about what happens to the galaxy. Blip nodded, his gaze steady. And because it's who we are. Lexa offered a faint smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. Well, here's hoping the universe cuts us some slack. Quinlan chuckled, though there was little humor in it. Yeah, I wouldn't bet on it. As the last resort glided through the calm after the storm, Quinlan knew their journey was far from over. The relic was a mystery wrapped in danger, and their path was fraught with pitfalls and uncertainty. But they'd face it together, with grit, humor, and a stubborn refusal to back down. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with more than just their lives intact. Quinlan kicked back in his seat, eyes scanning the sparse interior of the last resort as they cruised through the relative calm that followed the storm. The battered old ship hummed its disgruntlement like a grumpy cat forced to tolerate its own existence. He turned to Lexa, who was fiddling with a tablet covered in alien script. Any chance that thing will tell us where to go next, or are we just trusting Blip's navigation skills and a prayer? Quinlan asked, with a smirk that was half challenge, half genuine curiosity. Lexa didn't even glance up. Her fingers moved with speed and precision, a linguist's ballet on the digital stage. I'm deciphering ancient scripts, Quinn, not brewing coffee. Takes time. Could use some coffee, though, Mort interjected with his usual lack of enthusiasm from the comms. Maybe laced with something to keep us awake until we actually find something useful, Quinlan grinned. I'll add it to the list, right next to not getting killed by Slarvians and figuring out what the hell we're doing. Blip, the ship's unflappable pilot, glanced over his shoulder, his focus never straying too far from the erratic readouts on the console. Wake me when you find an ancient relic that brews coffee. Or one that makes a decent sandwich, Lexa muttered, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. The team had barely settled into a rhythm of banter and anticipation when Lexa suddenly froze, eyes wide as saucers. She stared at the tablet as if it had just told her she'd won the intergalactic lottery. With a cautious excitement, she tapped one final, decisive sequence. Well, I'll be damned, she whispered, her voice a curious cocktail of disbelief and triumph. Quinlan leaned in. What's got you looking like you just found the meaning of life? Lexa turned the tablet around, revealing a whirling holographic map. It's a guide. The scripts, it's a damn roadmap to the vault's entrance. Blip raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. I take it back. You might be the Queen of Sheba, hold the coronation, Quinlan said, grinning like a cat with a canary. Lexa, tell me you can get us there. Lexa shrugged, her expression nonchalant despite the significance of their breakthrough. It's practically a straight shot. Assuming we don't hit any cosmic potholes, Mort's voice crackled over the comms. Just watch out for traffic. Thanks for the tip, Mort, Quinlan replied, rolling his eyes. Wouldn't want to rear-end a comet. Lex's discovery was a beacon of hope in their otherwise desperate gamble, a light at the end of a very dark and stormy tunnel. With the coordinates locked in and Blip's steady hand at the helm, they set a course for the vault, the promise of answers tantalizingly close. As they made their way towards the vault's supposed location, Quinlan allowed himself a moment of reflection. It was hard to shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the universe had taken a particular interest in their little escapade. And not in the fun, reality TV way, but more in the we're the next great snack kind of way. Anyone else feel like we're the center of some cosmic joke? He murmured, mostly to himself. Lexa glanced up from her translations, smirking. If we are, I hope the punchline's worth it. Hell of a setup so far, Blip added, taking a casual sip from what looked suspiciously like a flask. Long as the twist isn't everyone dies, I'm in. They were closing in on the coordinates when a familiar, unwelcome blip pinged on the radar. Quinlan's stomach dropped, a lead weight of dread. Slarvian ships, sleek and ominous, loomed in the distance. Looks like our fans have arrived, Quinlan muttered, the lightness replaced with steely resolve. Everyone get ready. This could get messy, Lexa snorted. Could, that's optimistic, Mort's voice cut through the tension, dry as ever. I've seen messier. Remember that bar on Acta Prime I try not to, Lexa said with a shudder. Still can't look at nachos the same way. Blip adjusted their course, the ship responding with reluctant grumbles. Quinlan weighed their options, aware that they were woefully outmatched in a straight fight. His mind raced for alternatives, anything to keep them alive long enough to reach the vault. Then, just as they prepared to evade or engage, an unexpected transmission crackled through the comms. It was a voice Quinlan recognized instantly, a voice he'd trusted once upon a time. Quinlan, old friend. Fancy meeting you here, his face hardened. Caldwell, should have known you'd show up with the Slarvians, the voice on the other end laughed, a sound that grated on Quinlan's nerves. You didn't think I'd let you have all the fun, did you? Lexa's gaze flickered to Quinlan, her expression unreadable. You know this guy, Quinlan nodded, his teeth clenched. Used to. He was supposed to be an ally. Blip's fingers danced over the controls, ready to make a break for it at the first sign of trouble. Guess he forgot to send the memo, Caldwell's voice purred from the speakers, the tone all false camaraderie. It's not too late to join me, Quinlan. Together we could rule this sector. The relic's power, save it, Quinlan snapped, his voice cold. Not interested in playing second fiddle to a sellout. Lexa arched an eyebrow, her amusement genuine. I love it when you talk dirty. The Slarvian ships hung back, clearly waiting for Caldwell's signal. Quinlan knew a trap when he saw one, but the vault's coordinates were almost within reach. They were so close, yet a galaxy away. Blip, how fast can you get us to that vault? Quinlan asked, his mind racing. Blip shrugged, a picture of nonchalance. Fast enough to make your hair stand on end. Do it, Quinlan ordered, his voice a whip crack of decision. We're not letting Caldwell beat us there. The last resort surged forward with a burst of speed that belied its battered exterior. Quinlan held his breath, the ship's metal frame groaning in protest, and prayed they'd reach the vault before Caldwell and his Slarvian friends made their move. As they streaked through space, the vault's entrance loomed ahead, a great, gaping maw set against a backdrop of swirling stars. It was a sight to behold, as awe-inspiring as it was terrifying. The kind of thing that made you wonder who in their right mind thought, hey, let's build a giant, possibly deadly structure out in the middle of nowhere. We're almost there, Blip confirmed, his voice calm and steady. Let's hope it's worth the trip, Lexa quipped, though there was a seriousness underlying her words. Before Quinlan could respond, alarms blared and the ship rocked violently. The Slarvians had made their move, firing a warning shot across their bow. Caldwell's getting impatient, Mort observed dryly. No kidding, Quinlan muttered, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and contingencies. They were seconds from the vault when Blip pulled the ship into a steep dive, narrowly avoiding another blast. The maneuver left them all breathless, the artificial gravity struggling to compensate. "Everyone hold on," Blip warned. "This is gonna be close." The entrance yawned before them, a dark void that promised either salvation or doom. The ship shuddered as they crossed the threshold, the Slarvian ships hanging back as if waiting to see what fate awaited them inside. As they settled into the cavernous interior, Quinlan released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For now, they'd bought themselves a reprieve. "Well, that was exhilarating," Lexa said, her tone dry as a desert. Quinlan flashed her a wan smile. "Let's just hope it wasn't for nothing." Blip powered down the engines, the ship settling into an uneasy silence. The vault loomed around them, its walls lined with strange, inscrutable symbols. It was both a fortress and a tomb, a place where secrets lay sleeping, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to awaken them. "All right, team," Quinlan said, rallying their spirits. "We didn't come this far to turn back now. Let's find out what's hidden in this place." Mort's voice crackled through the comms, his words an unexpected comfort. "Just remember, whatever we find, it's not gonna be simple." "If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing." Lexa nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's get to it." They gathered their gear, the tension a living thing that coiled around them, ready to strike. As they prepared to disembark, Quinlan couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of their journey lay ahead. Betrayal had complicated an already dangerous mission, but they were nothing if not survivors. "Let's go," Quinlan said, leading the way with a mix of determination and dread. "Time to see if we're heroes or just the punchline of a cosmic joke." The vault's interior was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, a place that seemed to defy logic and sanity. As they navigated the winding corridors, Quinlan couldn't help but marvel at the sheer audacity of whoever had built such a place. "You ever think the ancients had too much time on their hands?" Lexa asked, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. Blip snorted. "That, or they needed better hobbies." Quinlan chuckled, though the sound was tinged with unease. "At least they didn't waste their time on reality TV. Probably had their own version," Mort chimed in. "Something with less explosions, maybe." They pressed on, the weight of the vault pressing in around them, a constant reminder of the stakes. With every step, Quinlan felt the enormity of their task settling on his shoulders, a burden that threatened to crush them all. But they were close, so close to the answers they sought. The relic lay somewhere within these walls, a prize that could change the fate of the galaxy, for better or worse. Turning a corner, Quinlan stopped short, his heart leaping into his throat. There, etched into the stone, was a symbol he'd seen in Lexa's translations, a marker of the relic's resting place. "Lexa," he called over his shoulder, his voice a tight whisper. "I think we've found it." She hurried to his side, her eyes widening as she took in the sight. "This is it." "We've found the way." The team gathered around, a mix of excitement and trepidation thrumming through them. They'd reached the threshold of destiny, a moment that would define not just their lives but potentially the future of the galaxy itself. "All right, let's do this," Quinlan said, his voice steady and sure. Together they stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay beyond. It was a moment of unity, of courage and defiance, and despite the odds stacked against them, Quinlan felt a glimmer of hope. Because in the end, it wasn't just about the relic or the Slarvians or even Caldwell's betrayal. It was about them, this mismatched, irreverent team of adventurers who dared to challenge the galaxy's chaos and carve out their own destiny. And come what may, they'd face it together. Quinlan peered into the dimly lit corridor before them, his eyes squinting to discern any threats or traps lurking in the shadows. The ancient vault was a massive architectural headache, designed by someone who obviously never had to navigate one of these death traps while being shot at by Slarvian zealots. "Looks like we're in the bowels of a cosmic Rubik's Cube," he muttered, scanning the alien symbols that adorned the walls. "Any idea what this says, Lexa?" Lexa smirked, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear as she focused on her tablet, its screen flickering under the sickly green light. "It's either welcome or run while you still can. Hard to tell with these ancient alphabets." "Great," Quinlan said, rolling his eyes. "Just what we need, a linguistic guessing game." Blip, Ever the pragmatic pilot tapped his foot impatiently. "Can we pick up the pace? This place smells like doom and bad decisions." He adjusted the grip on his laser pistol, ready to let loose at the first sign of trouble. With a resigned sigh, Quinlan nodded and gestured for the team to move forward. The corridor stretched ahead, an endless maze of metal and stone, each twist and turn more foreboding than the last. Mort's voice crackled through the comms, offering the kind of bleak humor that only he could deliver. "Just remember, if we get lost, I'm blaming the navigator." "Hey," Blip shot back. "I only navigate ships, not interstellar labyrinths." As they trudged deeper into the vault, the oppressive silence was broken only by their footsteps and the occasional ominous creak from the ancient structure. It was the sort of place that made you feel like you were being watched, even if the only witnesses were the ever-present shadows. "Anyone else get the feeling this place is just waiting to collapse on us?" Lexa asked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. Quinlan chuckled, though it was more to keep his nerves in check than out of genuine amusement. "That'd be just our luck. Survive Slarvian warships only to be squashed like bugs in an alien tomb." The path led them to a massive door, its surface inscribed with more of the indecipherable script. It loomed over them, a barrier more imposing than any they'd yet faced. "Blip, any chance you can work your magic on this thing?" Quinlan asked, knowing full well that Blip's skills usually involved flying through rather than opening obstacles. Blip shrugged, pulling a multi-tool from his belt. "I'll give it a shot, but if it explodes, I'm not taking the blame." While Blip fiddled with the control panel, Lexa leaned in close to Quinlan, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "So, what really happened between you and Caldwell?" Quinlan sighed, the weight of past betrayals heavy on his shoulders. "He was the kind of friend who'd have your back in a scrap, then sell you out if the price was right. We parted ways when I realized his idea of loyalty was about as consistent as a politician's promise." Lexa nodded, her expression understanding. "Sounds like a real charmer." "You have no idea," Quinlan replied, his voice bitter. A sharp click echoed through the corridor and Blip stepped back, a satisfied grin on his face. "There we go. Who knew ancient aliens used something as simple as a time lock?" The door groaned open, revealing a chamber that seemed untouched by time. In its center stood a pedestal, and atop it lay the relic they'd been searching for. Quinlan's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment they'd risked everything for. They approached cautiously, each step bringing with it a mixture of excitement and dread. As they drew closer, the relic came into focus, its appearance both surprising and absurd. Quinlan stared at it, dumbfounded. Is that a toaster?" Lexa blinked, disbelief etched across her face. "I think it is." Blip scratched his head, clearly just as confused. "This is what all the fuss is about." "A bloody toaster," Mort's laughter erupted over the comms, a rare sound that bordered on hysterical. "Looks like the ancients had a sense of humor after all." Quinlan couldn't help but chuckle, the tension of the moment dissolving in the face of such an absurd discovery. All this for a toaster. "I guess the Slarvians weren't kidding when they said they have a religious obsession with Earth." Lexa examined the relic, her fingers tracing its surface. "The design's old, sure, but why would it be considered so sacred?" Quinlan shrugged, the irony of it all not lost on him. Maybe they thought it was a sacred artifact. Or maybe they just really liked toast. Blip paced around the pedestal, still trying to wrap his head around their prize. "So, what's the plan now? We bring this thing back and tell everyone the truth." "The truth," Quinlan repeated, his voice laden with humor and exasperation. "That the great relic that countless beings have fought and died for is a kitchen appliance." Lexa tapped her tablet, the blue light casting strange shadows. "It might shatter their entire belief system, turn the cult fervor into a cosmic joke." Quinlan nodded, the weight of their discovery settling upon him. "And maybe that's for the best. Time to put an end to the madness." They gathered the relic, treating it with as much reverence as one could muster for a piece of outdated technology, and made their way back through the vault's corridors. The journey, though still fraught with danger, seemed lighter now, the laughter and camaraderie of the team dispelling the shadows. As they approached the exit, Mort's voice came through once more, a playful lilt to his words. "Quinlan, you ever think about going into comedy? This whole thing's got the makings of a great stand-up routine." "Not sure the galaxy's ready for my brand of humor," Quinlan quipped, a smile tugging at his lips. "But if this doesn't work out, I might consider it." They emerged from the vault to find the Slarvian ship still hanging back, their ominous presence now more a source of amusement than dread. The storm that had threatened to engulf them had finally rolled in, its thunderous roar a fitting backdrop to the conclusion of their journey. "Think Caldwell will believe us when we tell him?" Blip asked, securing the relic in the last resort's cargo hold. Quinlan shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "If he doesn't, we'll just give him some burnt toast as proof." Lexa chuckled, the sound a bomb after the tension of their mission. "Who knows? Maybe it'll become the new galactic delicacy." As they prepared to depart, Quinlan took one last look at the vault, the place that had tested their resolve and forged their bond. Despite the odds, they'd done it. They'd found the relic, uncovered the truth, and now held a power that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of its past. "All right, team," Quinlan said, gathering his crew with a nod of respect and camaraderie. "Let's get out of here before the Slarvians change their minds." The last resort powered up, the comforting hum of its engines a promise of safety and a new beginning. They ascended into the stormy sky, leaving the relic of Earth's misunderstood history behind. As they soared through the tempest, the darkness giving way to the star-speckled void of space, Quinlan reflected on their journey. They'd faced betrayal, danger, and the absurdity of the universe, yet had emerged stronger, wiser, and perhaps a bit more cynical. "Quinlan," Lexa said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over them. "Whatever happens next, I'm glad we did this together." Quinlan smiled, the warmth of her words a reminder of what truly mattered. "Me too, Lexa." "Me too." As the last resort sailed through the cosmos, their destination still uncertain, one thing was clear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them as they always had, with humor, defiance, and an unyielding belief in the power of human ingenuity. "Blip," Quinlan called over his shoulder, "set a course for anywhere but here. Let's see where the stars take us." "Aye, Captain," Blip replied, his voice filled with anticipation for the adventures yet to come. And with that they plunged into the unknown, ready for whatever the universe dared to throw their way. The last resort creaked and groaned, a faithful old mutt of a ship, as it rocketed through the black void of space. Quinlan Zephyr sat in the tiny cockpit, feet propped on the dash, contemplating the absurdity of the toaster that now rested in their cargo hold. He was convinced that somewhere in the cosmos, some ancient alien prankster was having one hell of a laugh at their expense. Mort's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the silence. "Quinlan, you ever wonder if we're the punchline to some cosmic joke? I mean, a toaster." "Really?" Quinlan smirked, glancing at the toaster through the cockpit door. "If we are, I hope the universe at least gets a good chuckle out of it. We could use some laughs after all the crap we've been through." Blip Tundra, from his seat at the navigation console, which still looked like something a drunken octopus might have designed, let out a derisive snort. "You know, I always thought we'd find something that could rewrite history, not make breakfast." Lexa Quicks, perched nearby with her ever-present tablet, rolled her eyes. "Well, at least we've got a good story out of it, the quest for the sacred toaster. Sounds like a bestseller already, provided anyone believes us," Quinlan added, stretching his arms. "We saved civilization from its own stupidity. Again." "And what do we get?" "A kitchen appliance and maybe some burnt toast." Blip punched a few buttons, the ship vibrating as he adjusted their course. "Back to Earth, then. Time to spread the gospel of the almighty toaster." "Good all Earth," Lexa said, the sarcasm dripping from her words. "Where cults pop up faster than you can say donate." The last resort hummed along, a battered metal potato in the vast stew of space. Their trajectory was set for Earth, which might as well have had home of the gullible written in neon lights across its atmosphere. As they neared Earth, Quinlan tapped the comms to give Mort a heads up. "We're almost planetside, Mort. Any updates on the Slarvian front?" Mort's voice was a low chuckle. "Those Slarvians have scattered like roaches in the light. Turns out, their godly appliance being a toaster was a bit of a buzzkill." "Who knew?" Lexa leaned back, arms crossed. "So what now? We tell the universe it's all one big misunderstanding and live happily ever after?" Blip shook his head. "Nah, I'm guessing we're about to be hailed as heroes, or idiots. Maybe both." Quinlan shrugged, glancing out at the ever-growing orb of Earth. "Maybe it's time we retire. Find a nice quiet corner of the galaxy where things don't try to explode or shoot us every 5 minutes. Retire." Lexa scoffed. "And miss out on all this fun." The comms buzzed again, Mort's voice sliding through like an old friend with bad news. "Speaking of which, Quinlan, you've got an incoming message from Caldwell. Says he's got a job for you." "Something about another relic," Quinlan groaned, a familiar tension coiling in his gut. "Of course he does. The universe never lets you rest, does it?" Lexa smirked, tucking her tablet under her arm. "And here you were thinking you'd get a vacation." "Hey, I'm not the one who thought a toaster could shake up the galaxy," Blip retorted, flipping switches with practiced ease. "If anything, this just proves we should expect the unexpected." Like a cosmic game of what the hell is that, the last resort dipped into Earth's atmosphere, shaking as if it were shedding old skin. Quinlan watched the continents below, sprawling like a map drawn by a child with a penchant for chaos. It was good to be home, even if home was a planet full of cults and chaos. Dock 73 came into view, a rusting hulk of metal and misfortune. It had the charm of a junkyard and the smell to match, but it was familiar, like an old pair of shoes that should probably be burned. Lexa unbuckled, standing with a stretch. "So, who's going to break it to Caldwell that the great relic is an ancient toaster?" Quinlan grinned, a wolfish expression that promised mischief. "I'll do it." Someone's got to see the look on his face. They disembarked, the clanging of metal underfoot a sweet symphony after the harrowing silence of the vault. Caldwell was waiting on the platform, a man who looked like he'd been born in a suit and never quite left it. "Quinlan," Caldwell greeted, his smile as oily as ever. "Good to see you alive and well." "What have you brought me this time?" Quinlan gestured to the toaster, now sitting proudly in the middle of the cargo bay. The holy grail of kitchenware. Caldwell's expression froze, then shifted to disbelief. "You're joking," Lexa snickered, stepping up beside Quinlan. "No joke. It's the real deal. The Slarvians thought it was a divine artifact. Turns out they just had a thing for toast." Blip leaned against the hull, arms crossed. "So, where's our next mission? Another wild goose chase for a cosmic spatula?" Caldwell rubbed his temples, a man drowning in the absurdity. "You know, I should have expected something like this. The universe has a twisted sense of humor." Quinlan clapped a hand on Caldwell's shoulder. "Look on the bright side. We've probably saved the galaxy from an interstellar bread shortage." Mort, who had finally joined them, chuckled from the shadows. "I always said the universe was run by lunatics. This just proves it." Caldwell sighed, a man resigned to his fate of dealing with maniacs. "Well, Quinlan, as amusing as this all is, I do have another mission for you." Quinlan's eyes narrowed, sensing another long, ridiculous adventure looming. "What is it this time?" "A relic shaped like a blender," Caldwell chuckled, shaking his head. "Nothing quite so culinary, something to do with a map. An ancient map leading to a vault that supposedly houses the secrets of the universe." Blip groaned. "Please tell me it's not another toaster." Caldwell spread his hands wide, the picture of innocence. "Who knows? The last thing anyone needs is another religious breakfast appliance." Lexa, unable to resist, added, "Whatever it is, you can count on us to bring back something completely useless." Quinlan took a deep breath, a man forever caught in the crosshairs of fate's prank. "All right, we're in. But if I find another toaster, I'm keeping it." The crew burst into laughter, their camaraderie the only solid ground in a universe that always seemed to be shifting beneath their feet. And as they walked away from the dock, their banter echoing through the corridors, Quinlan knew one thing for sure. No matter where their next mission took them, they'd face it together, with humor, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of human ingenuity to turn even the most absurd situations into triumphs. As they prepared the last resort for yet another journey, Quinlan stole a moment to gaze out at the stars. Each one a possibility, a story waiting to unfold. And though the universe was vast and filled with unknowns, he felt a strange comfort in knowing that, whatever they encountered, they'd tackle it head-on, with wit, sarcasm, and maybe a bit of toast on the side. "So, where to next?" Blip asked, settling into his seat with the confidence of a man who'd seen it all and come back for more. "Anywhere but a toaster factory," Lex quipped, her fingers already dancing across her tablet as she pulled up maps and star charts. Mort's voice cut through the anticipation like a knife through warm butter. "I heard there's a planet made entirely of cheese out there. Maybe we could pair it with the toaster and make some cosmic grilled cheese." Quinlan laughed, shaking his head at the ridiculousness of it all. "Well, wherever we end up, at least we'll have a breakfast story for the ages." And with that, the last resort took off once more, leaving behind the madness of Earth and plunging into the vast, star-strewn horizon of space. A small ship with a big story, and a crew that wouldn't have it any other way.